Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum. In this video, I'll be refuting yet another contention made against Hadith preservation, namely the late origin of Isnad. Let's get started. So, here's the contention. According to Muslims, Isnad started after the first fitna. According to the Orientalists, the Isnad arose quite late in the time after the second fitna. Was bas- the first fitna was the quarrel between Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu, Hazrat Muawiyah Raziyallahu anhu, and the things that happened after the uh, Shahadat of Hazrat Usman Raziyallahu anhu. The second fitna was the issue basically between the Umayyads and Abdullah ibn Zubair Raziyallahu anhuma. So supposedly there is a consensus among this on the Orientalists. The Isnad originated after second fitna, which is quite late, but it became widespread in the second Islamic century. The main the main evidence quoted for this, other than whining about consensus, is the narration of Ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh. And basically, another scholar, a second or third century names a scholar named Al-Justani is also mentioned, who mentioned this in the context of Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaid, which is related to the second fitna period. So I'll just start on the refutation now. Actually, Joshua Little, the moron, made one more point. Here is his argument. Basically, first I'll read the quote of Imam ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh. Imam ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh said, they did not used to ask about the Isnad, but when the fitna arose, they said, name to us your men. As for those who belong to Ahl Sunnah, their ahadith were accepted. As for those who were innovators, their ahadith were rejected. So here's the quote of Imam ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh. Firstly, supposedly Jumbal has several works on this method, right? On this narration. There is another report from Imam Ibrahim Nakhai, who affirms this supposedly. This can be supported but not necessarily by the reports of Sayyid ibn al-Jubair rahmatullah alayhi and Hamad ibn Salama rahmatullah alayhi. Those two reports, by the way, do nothing to show the origins of Isnad. Another evidence for this claim, the late origin of Isnad, is supposedly that most common links are present in the middle of at the beginning of second Islamic century. So, and basically, the moron Joshua Little, he makes the point that because Imam Ibn Sirin refers to whatever the event is as fitna, just the fitna, it would be necessarily be referring to the one that occurred when he was an adult, namely the conflict of Abdullah ibn Zubair radiyallahu anhuma. This actually doesn't work, but this is his argument in this regard. So let's get started on the refutation. By the way, since this clown didn't give much of an argument, Joshua Little, right? I will and he's using Junbol as an authority here. So I will refute Junbol's argument in this regard as well. Okay, so let's get started on the refutation. Firstly, as for quoting Al-Juzjani Rahmatullah, right? He can quote one Muslim scholar for his position, I can quote dozens for my position, so that doesn't work. As for the report of Imam Ibrahim Nakhai, I actually never heard of it before, and I haven't seen it mentioned in the context of Isnads. So that's quite new, so I don't know about that. I can't comment on that. Usually in the discussions of Isnad, the origins of Isnad, the main thing brought up is always the report of Imam ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh. So I'll just focus my attention on this regard. The Joshua Little also uses, since Joshua Little is using Junbal as an authority, I will refute his argument here as well. So here's the basic refutation. Firstly, the consensus of Orientalists is worthless. I think this point is self-evident. Look, people want to pretend that Western scholars have some sort of authority in this regard, but I mean, just consider a very simple point, right? Biblical scholars, whether you think they have good arguments or not, whether they win against Christians or not, at least they are willing to defend their arguments against Christians and debate Christians. Why are Orientalists so scared of debating Muslims? Why should same respect be given to a group of people who are willing to defend their positions and a group of people who can't defend their positions? They shouldn't get the same respect, so the consensus of Orientalists is worthless. Secondly, the common link theory as well is worthless as well. These morons want to pretend that our records, our scholars are worthless, right? Why should their scholars get any weight? They don't. Now, here's the basic the claim that Joshua Little was making here is that Imam Ibn Sirin just uses the word fitna, right? So this has to mean that basically he would be referring to an event that happened in his adult life. This contention doesn't work. It doesn't show that Imam Ibn Sirin would have to be referring to the second fitna, and I'll give a very simple reason for this. Most likely, Imam Ibn Sirin, without qualification, would refer to the just one event as fitna, or the fitna as the event which have the biggest importance. Whether he was an adult, this event happened or not, is actually irrelevant. I'll give a very simple reason. So let's say a major world war in my lifetime. Let's suppose a major world war takes place for 4 years, and later, when I'm very young, and when I'm 20 years old, some war between two countries takes place, right? Or a European war, or a war that is restricted to a continent, or it doesn't have anywhere near as much consequence as the world war takes place. If I have lived through both those wars, right? Which of the two war would I be referring to when I say the war? The one with the biggest impact and the biggest importance, right? This is just common sense. So no one in their right mind will dispute that the first fitna, the conflict between Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu anhu and Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Muawiyah Raziyallahu anhu, had the bigger importance. No one in their right mind will dispute it. No Muslim will dispute this point. So, if one event is being referred to as the fitna, or the problem, right? It would be most likely the first fitna, because it had a much bigger impact. Now, this basically refutes Joshua Little's finding. Now I'll go into John Bull's argument in this regard. It's actually more important because he actually tries to prove his interpretation is correct from Islamic sources. He does a piss poor job of it, but let's get started on his contention as well. What he does, firstly, he collects all the references where the term fitna is used in regard to the first fitna. He gives random reasons to dismiss all of them, but one of the main reasons he gives for dismissing all of them is that they are all present in Abbasid sources. He basically then he tries to use the examples when this word is applied, the fitna is applied to the war of Abdullah ibn Zubayr raziyallahu anhuma. He accepts this uncritically. Well, the first major problem in this regard is when the word fitna is used with regards to Abdullah ibn Zubayr raziyallahu anhuma, those texts are also in Abbasid works. So I mean, why the double standard? More than that, Junbul actually cited only 15 examples when the word fitna is used in regards to the conflict of after Hazrat Usman raziyallahu anhu. This number is too low. There are a lot of other examples where the word fitna is used in regards to Hazrat Usman raziyallahu anhu. So Junbul's claim in this regard doesn't work. By the way, I link the study I am using here, the PhD thesis in this regard, because I had to look it up for the issue of origin of Isnad. I will link it in the video description, and if anyone wants, they can read that for the references for all of this. So Junbul basically failed in proving the point about, he basically assumed his conclusions, and he didn't bother to prove that the word regarding the fitna basically only refers to or mainly refers to Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu's war. Actually, now there's something really funny that you need to realize happened in this regard. The counter argument to all of this didn't come from a Muslim. It actually came from an Orientalist. Joseph Van Ness, I think, is his name. And understand this. There is a risala attributed to Al Hassan bin Muhammad bin Al Hanafiya Rahmatullah alayh. This is before the year 95 Hijri because he died at that time, right? In that time, the word fitna is used without clarification, and it is referring to the event of Hazrat Usman radiallahu anhu, the aftermath of his death. So we have a contemporary reference of the word fitna being used, and it without qualification, and it is used being regard to Hazrat Usman radiallahu anhu. Understand why this is extremely relevant here. The Orientalist contention is the word fitna without qualification is used by Ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh in that time period. It is referring to Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu's problem, his conflict. But we have a contemporary text from that time period that without the word where the word fitna is mentioned, and it does not qualify which fitna it is, but it is clearly referring to the conflict of Hazrat Usman radiallahu anhu. So from a report from that time period, we can prove the interpretation, the Sunni Muslim interpretation, that the origins of Isnad are earlier than these clowns are claiming. From that report. Funny thing is, Junbul actually realizes the force of this argument. He admits that this interpretation would refute him. So he actually, he does really something really funny in this regard. What he does is he tries to redefine fitna here to make it to bring a third interpretation where fitna basically refers to the entire rule of Hazrat Usman radiallahu anhu, and it's quite complicated, and it's actually quite funny. You can read it, but he has to redefine the word fitna for the third time just to deal with this argument, because this just refutes him. It's actually quite funny, and I will link the PhD thesis in the video description. So it's actually a short chapter, and I do recommend you read it. So I think this moron gets refuted even by Orientalist in this regard, an Orientalist, Joseph Van Ness. More than that, more than all of this, we actually have a report from Imam Ibn Sirin Rahmatullah alayh, where he is referring to the event of Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu as Fitna ibn al-Zubair. He is not referring to it as the Fitna or a Fitna. He is referring to it as Fitna ibn al-Zubair. I mean, to be honest, I'm actually surprised at how easily this Orientalist contention is refuted. Inshallah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Inshallah, I'll keep refuting these morons till next time. Assalamu alaikum. By the way, I'll link the thesis in the video description. To read the chapter on origins of Isnad is actually quite interesting, and it's not very long, at least the chapter. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.